This is the United States of Europe, using an American view to make the EU a little less boring. This week, special report from the European Urban Knowledge Network and their event, The Civic Economy, presented by, as always, your charming and suave host, me, Greg Shapiro. Good day. Welcome, everyone. I am the American Netherlander, giving the EU the respect they deserve by making fun of them just like anyone else. And this week, we're doing something new. We're taking our cameras directly to an event happening in Amsterdam for the European Urban Knowledge Network. But before we do that, the headlines. EU leaders again expressed hope that Russian sanctions and lower oil revenues would force Russia and Vladimir Putin to show signs of cooperation in Ukraine. But analysts say Europe's continued dependence on Russian natural gas and heating oil gives Vladimir Putin continued confidence. In essence, Europe is saying we're turning up the heat, and Putin is saying winter is coming. The EU Budget Commission in Brussels is still waiting for France and Italy to submit their overdue and over-budget national budgets for approval. The Commission would normally punish them for being overdue, but instead they'll use the extra time to figure out who exactly will be looking at the budget. And more positive signs on the Ebola virus being contained, although the psychological effects continue to reverberate, especially in the West. The Centers for Disease Control concluded that there's something about the Ebola virus that continues to make particularly Americans scared, and clarified that Ebola makes you ill, not African. A recent poll by Fox News asked what Americans consider their biggest threat: ISIS, Ebola, or equal. In fact, it is equal, the sugar substitute that is possibly more deadly than either of those two. Now that the EU is cracking down on overly lenient Irish tax laws, American pharmaceutical company AbbVie has called off a proposed takeover of the Irish drug firm Shire, effectively leaving them abandoned at the altar. Picture Shire as represented by the Hobbit and the gargantuan AbbVie as Smog, and you realize maybe it's for the best that they don't get married. UK Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron is going ahead with his plans to have Britain sell off its 40% stake in the Eurostar rail lines through the Eurotunnel. If he can't remove Britain from the EU, at least he can cut off Britain from the EU. And outgoing EU Competitiveness Commissioner Joaquin Almunia announced possible legal action against Amazon for tax dodging in Luxembourg. Also, he added, it's pretty mean for companies that make money from cutting down trees to name themselves after a forest of cut down trees. And to make matters worse, when Amazon designed their new phone, what did they call it? The Fire? Almunia may be happy to know that the phones are selling so poorly, Amazon is literally having a fire sale. Next up, it's time for good news, bad news. This week, the topic is the sharing economy. Good news, European economies are looking for a much-needed boost, and it may just be coming in the form of tech startups like Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb, online services to coordinate ride-sharing, apartment sharing all over the world. Bad news, all over the world, the new sharing economy is bumping heads with the existing economy, and everyone from taxi drivers to hotels is complaining. But the good news, Uber, for example, is already adapting, allowing licensed taxi drivers to use the service as well. But the bad news, it might be too little too late. New York State has declared Airbnb illegal. Uber is illegal in Germany and faces a ban in France. But the good news, There's a new EU Commission taking office on the 1st of November, and everyone is waiting to hear what they'll have to say about what's fair, what's not, what's practical, and what's useful. Meanwhile, there's a lot of gray area, and what better place to take advantage of gray area than Amsterdam and the Netherlands? Of course, sex and drugs are illegal, it's Europe, but whether they're enforced is a different matter. Could this be fertile ground for finding a middle ground? Well, the European Urban Knowledge Network thinks so. They're holding their annual conference for the civic economy in Amsterdam, and they'll be talking about everything from Uber and Airbnb to peer-to-peer apps, citizen-to-citizen services like city farming, carpooling, childcare, and even fundraising, the all-important crowdfunding, which now generates billions of euros per year. So this week, we take our cameras to Pakhuis de Zwijger in Amsterdam for the civic economy. Well, here we are talking about the European Urban Knowledge Network and the civil society. So, what does that mean? I mean, we talk a lot on the show about top-down, Brussels-focused kind of stuff, but what about the grassroots bottom-up, the social entrepreneurs as well as the tech startups who are tackling everything from utilizing underused office space, retail space, rental space, even gardens, and maybe even your car? What does it mean for you? Could you get involved, or could you even just take advantage? Let's find out.
Well, EUKN is a network of member states in Europe. We do three things. We exchange knowledge on urban issues and a wide variety of urban topics. We make it available through the internet, so www.eukn.eu is the internet address of our network. We organize all sorts of meetings for our members. We call it policy labs, experimental meetings, where we deal with issues that are raised by our members on different topics, like going from citizen participation to area development, urban planning, etc. We have an annual conference like this one on the civic economy, and we also provide, let's say, policy research for members that, or for countries actually, that hold the presidencies of the EU. So we work very much also at the European level.
Great. Well, let's see. If people are just trying to imagine what is the civic economy, we were talking about Uber or Airbnb, but can you give some more grassroots examples of some?
Well, there are many. There's a wide range of different activities. I mean, the people share all different sort of services, going from you can get your hair cut by a neighbor, and in exchange of that you can get extra money, or he will fix something for you. But also, I mean, some of the initiatives are quite more complex, like setting up a broadband internet connection, for instance, at a lower level.
Right.
Sometimes they jump in where the local governments or regional governments are not active, for instance, in more remote areas. Sometimes.
And people who are living off the grid, for example.
Exactly, off the grid. So there are quite some successful examples of people who have been able to set up these new initiatives. Energy-saving companies. Of course, we all know the more famous examples like Airbnb and Taxi, Uber, Pro. But I think these really grassroots levels, social initiatives, people who set up new cafes, childcare initiatives. I mean, these are very small, low-scale initiatives that do have an impact in the economy, and that's why we address the topic of the civic economy.
And we were also wondering, why now?
Well, I think it's in the air in a way. I mean, when we started preparing this conference, it was almost a year ago. It was not that much discussed, but apparently, the whole debate with Airbnb, cities struggling with allowing Airbnb houses or apartments being rent to foreigners, the Uber Pro discussion, where you see that cities do not really know how to respond to it. That all came in from the last year. But this is a process that has been taking place already for quite a while. So we think it's just the right time, and we're very happy with this conference.
It's a good group of people you've got here today. You've got people from the government level, local, national, regional, but also, the startups, the entrepreneurs, and even someone from the European Investment Bank who said,
well, I was quite happy with that, indeed. Yes, was perhaps a bit, not shocked, but surprised by getting the floor. But I think it's important also that such a huge investor in Europe is following this topic, which usually takes place at a grassroots level.
Indeed, yeah. She said normally she's just giving subsidies to huge investment projects, but at least she's here. She's learning.
Well, she's learning, and that's a good thing. And I'll meet her from time to time in different meetings. So we'll discuss also how perhaps in the end the investment bank can also jump in these grassroots initiatives.
And a final question: someone said, are we labeled as communist or more capitalist? Or are both labels fair?
Well, perhaps they're both not fair. There are some capitalist aspects in the civic economy, of course.
Part of the EUKN conference is actually happening on location at places like these. The first ever covered shopping street in the Netherlands called the Jan Evertsenstraat, which has fallen into some disrepair, but it is collective action from citizen initiatives and shop owners that are uniting to create some new construction. As you can see, some construction happening here with help of the city, and there's even some interest in some new, bars and cafes that are popping up, and apparently, as in the case of this one, I think it's even attracting some hipsters. But what's the story in places like Berlin and even Liverpool?
So, I think it is an economy where citizens are taking the lead in terms of developing projects as citizens, not just as commercial entrepreneurs. So we see them stepping in where existing systems fail, such as in renewable energy, which by and large both the state and the market are very bad at resolving,
so far,
or the care system, which we all know is broken both in the UK and the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. So citizens come up with their own solutions, and they do that in a way that is different. It is collaborative. It unlocks a lot of the amazing resources that already exist but are somehow not being used, right? So whether that's time or talent or buildings or spaces or whatever. And they often work together with the public sector or the private sector, right? Yep. So it's not necessarily in a kind of traditional antagonistic, action-orientated way of working, which we know from some citizen initiative, right? Protest first.
Right.
These are people who are building, who are being constructive, who are in that sense, resolving the big questions of our time, and they're also often just having fun with it. I think that the civic economy is powerful, very much also because it comes very strongly from what citizens love doing, and they are projecting their creativity, their energy, their passion onto projects that ultimately end up having massive economic, social, and environmental effects.
And and it's not just the big sort of more commercial versions of Uber, Uber Pro, whatever Airbnb.
Well,
so like you're talking about.
Yeah. So Uber and Airbnb and the like, they definitely have their place, right? Because they do one thing really well. They unlock underused physical resources.
Right.
And they do that through building platforms, new marketplaces that can bring demand and supply together, right? That is smart. It is, I think, very positive in many ways. Let's be honest, like I said in my talk just now, the Amsterdam market for taxis and hotels needs disrupting. Right?
I will join you there.
Right?
It's terrible.
It's terrible. So that is one end of the spectrum, and I like it, and I'm intrigued by it. I also see some issues, the same that everyone sees, I think, in terms of governance of quality. And but that's only part of what we're talking about. The other element that we're talking about really is citizens developing this locally for themselves, so that citizens unlocking a new renewable energy resource, citizens improving the local public realm, making it edible, and in doing so, generating a whole lot of civic pride, new economic opportunities, self-confidence, etc.
And maybe, sorry, go ahead. Well, my next question was going to be about the internationals, the experience all over Europe. And what's interesting here is that a lot of our focus is on European level top down, but a lot of focus with the civic economy is like a league of mayors, a league of civic societies. Yeah. And what we're seeing now is that these knowledge migrants or internationals really don't matter if they're in Berlin or Barcelona or London or Bristol, wherever. So, is there more of a network that is being created?
That's starting to happen. And I think that's going to be one of the most interesting things to watch, right? So, I think by definition, a lot of this is local and starts out being local, right? Because in the local situation, you see the opportunities or the needs, and also certainly the networks for people to start taking these initiatives. No doubt.
Okay.
But of course, the knowledge and the examples and the inspiration is often global, and also the know-how. So I think we're talking about a whole new way of thinking of know-how. And that's where I think a lot of this will network itself. And you already see local renewables networks linking in with each other, local workspace initiatives. I'm part of one myself, Impact Hub. That's a global network using it combines the advantages of scale
Right.
with the reality that really those places will only work if they're really locally original and authentic, right? So you get this kind of local global switching, but equally I think it's important that actually we find better ways of enabling people to network and to be more effective in sort of peer-to-peer sharing. Because let's be honest, a lot of these initiatives are driven by passion on very low levels of capital, and people are putting all their energy and drive into the local project and not necessarily always finding the time to learn and to share effectively. And I think that's something we need to work on. How do these peer-to-peer networks actually develop?
And last question, I mean, assuming that there is more progress with the civic economy, what's going to be the key to getting working families, working classes to jump on board?
I think working classes and working families are already jumping on board. Right. So I think I really counter the idea that this is somehow the privilege of the granola-eating liberal middle classes.
Got it.
No, because I think that is something an accusation you often hear, and I think it's a problem because I think that makes it very easy for the usual critics to effectively dismiss it. But actually, a lot of this, a lot of what we're seeing is actually local people in perhaps less privileged neighborhoods taking initiatives. I've seen phenomenal projects in Liverpool, like one of the poorest neighborhoods of Liverpool, where local people working with an artist. Sure, it does happen in the interaction between different groups, right? But where local people have taken over an old bakery opposite a football stadium, so business guaranteed, and are starting it anew as a co-op, as a way for the neighborhood to meet, a place to meet, a way for people to learn skills, and to actually change the narrative of their neighborhood, which has been mostly a story of disaster, and where the government has been demolishing houses and basically telling these people that they have no future in that place. They take their own action, inspired by others, but they are themselves taking action and improving the neighborhood. So I don't believe that this is solely something for the middle classes, not at all.
That's brilliant. If we want to find out more about your projects, where can we look?
So my company, 00, is working on a wide range of civic economy prototypes, from open hardware and furniture through to social investment. And you can find out more about this on project00.cc.
And I was really wondered if actually, it's one of the questions I think I will raise later today, is it really true that for government it means more work? I think they just have to change the rules.
Now today, the European Urban Knowledge Network calls it the civic economy. So at least you can tell it's a growing it's a growing phenomenon. We're still coming up with the proper terminology, but they also said that it's interesting how the cities are linking up quicker than nations are linking up, quicker than the European Union top down. This is real sort of bottom up stuff. Can you give a couple examples of what you're working on here in Amsterdam that might be ready to cross borders?
First of all, it fits truly well that the city fits the bottom-up perspective. Also, a city is something that people can grasp. I think a lot of people have no really an imagination what a nation-state is, or what Europe is, but the city they walk around in, they live in. And this far, it's also where the collaborative economy is happening. We also see opportunities in areas where people are leaving, so the really small towns, but we call them Krimgebieden in the Netherlands. Areas where they have the problem of less people instead of more, but cities have to cope with more people in the near future. And the way I see it is, if you take a collaborative economy perspective, you put on those glasses, also taking in account the previous presentation, then you suddenly see opportunities instead of challenges.
And can you get specific about like one of the projects you're working on, just for people who still can't wrap their head around it? We've talked about Airbnb, we've talked about Uber, but it's more specific as well.
Well, the thing with Amsterdam Sharing City is that we'd like to see an umbrella over the city. And this is the Sharing City umbrella, which has a vision that we want to have a city that's sustainable with a lot of social cohesion and economic resilience. And that we see the collaborative economy as a vehicle to get there. And we basically hope that our mayor here in Amsterdam would sign such kind of a resolution. So that all these smaller problems, whether it's Airbnb or whether it's Uber or whether it's any other collaborative economy platform, then at least the city knows we have a vision. We want the collaborative economy to land in our city. So with that in the back of their mind, it's easier to make all those smaller decisions.
Yeah.
And that's just one part of it. The other part of Amsterdam Sharing City is that we're not just looking at the government, they're actually just one of the stakeholders.
Right.
We take the whole range of stakeholders we have in society. So we also, for instance, look at schools and sport clubs, but also companies like the banks that are in Amsterdam, insurance companies, but also universities. So basically everything that makes a city into a city should be on board on this. And
not waiting for government regulation to catch up. I mean, you're actually you're basically telling the governments, hey, catch up.
Yeah,
We're way ahead of you here.
And it fits also in the culture we have in the Netherlands, I think, to make a group of stakeholders and then come up with a solution and present it ready for the government. And I think it's also the only way we can get there, because it is bottom up, so you need all those different stakeholders to be able to do it.
And you mentioned sustainability. Can you give us one example of a project that involves sustainability from grassroots?
I think there are loads of opportunities in car sharing, for instance.
Car sharing,
in the city. We have a lot of car-to-go's, those electric smart vehicles that you can just open with a card, and some green wheels for the longer distances.
Right.
But we also have in Amsterdam the largest uptake of the peer-to-peer car sharing platforms, such as Snapcar, MyWheels, WeGo. We have quite a number of platforms that are facilitating these in the Netherlands. And
just the very statistic of how much downtime every car has. If you own a car, most of the 90% of the time it's just sitting there parked.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is costing you money. Like, why not?
And I know a number of people who actually earn back all the money they pay for the car by renting them out when they don't use it. So.
And I've even heard the energy minister for the Netherlands talking about how maybe in 20 years or less, we might not own cars anymore. I mean, already it's gone to lease cars instead of owning. What if it's just, I use it when I need it?
Yeah, well, you have some concepts now starting, for instance, in Denmark and Spain, I heard about it, where you can lease a car for free as long as you rent it out 8 times a month.
There we go.
Yeah, and that's also great, because a lot of times people ask, okay, the sharing economy is for the elite, because you can only share if you have stuff.
Right.
But this really creates opportunities for anyone to get access, for instance, to the mobility of a car through these kind of schemes. So this next evolution that we see now in the collaborative economy, that provides new opportunities to really reach out to other social groups as well.
Great.
Well, I'm one of the connectors of WeShare, and WeShare is a global network of people who are promoting the collaborative or sharing society. And so we do different kind of events, or once in a while I do a workshop or I do a presentation talking about this kind of stuff, or we're doing events.
Okay. We talked about the Airbnb and the Uber and all that. There's a lot of resistance that's happening now. Are you getting resistance as well from the more grassroots
For what?
kind of?
I don't know.
We don't know.
I think we are not dangerous for anybody.
Oh, good. So. Yeah. But are you getting help as well from the municipalities, from Berlin or?
From Berlin directly, not yet. In other cities, I think there's better support because we have connectors all in many different countries. For example, you mentioned Barcelona. I think there is also much more closer connection between WeShare people, connectors, and the city. The same in Paris, of course.
We've talked a lot about the startups of the civic economy, but what about the more established ones like Airbnb? And we figured we might as well talk to someone who's been a host and a guest of Airbnb, Broadcast Amsterdam's own Lauren Becker. Let's go inside. Hey! This is Lauren Becker from Broadcast Amsterdam, who is also, an experienced host and guest for Airbnb. So I thought I would ask you a little bit about the sharing, collaborative, civic economy. But
fantastic.
Yeah, what's your experience being, first of all, a guest when you go visit Airbnb?
Yes, I've had a lot of great experiences being a guest. I've stayed in some amazing properties.
Yeah.
In San Francisco and a really great one in Barcelona.
Okay.
As well. It's been really fun because you get a much more local experience than you would at a hotel, and you meet some interesting people along the way, of course.
Some of them who might ask you odd questions. I've heard can you move my car?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I might get a ticket if my car is not moved. So you wouldn't mind moving my car, right? Well, kind of. Well.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that came along with it.
Didn't sign up for that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. For I think a great idea is key, and great user experience and a great app. Of course.
Yeah.
But also unique things that add to the user experience, such as Airbnb's $1 million insurance policy that covers the hosts.
So you hear that,
apartment.
startups? If you can come up with $1 million, yes. But the insurance, exactly.
Insurance, and I'm sure Uber does something very similar.
Right.
Also, the payment plan, which both Uber and Airbnb have made incredibly simple.
All right, that was that. And you were mentioning, unfortunately, there are people who were gaming the system, taking advantage of, a number of spaces and renting them out via Airbnb, like in San Francisco, in Europe as well.
Yeah,
and that's too bad.
Yeah, I think what the sharing economy allows is for everybody to kind of become a micro entrepreneur, and become this business person that they want to be. And it's like, oh, I have this, so I'm going to rent this out, which is great.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's a negative thing to do that. I think that sometimes, like, say you have a rent-controlled apartment, and you're paying X amount, and you're renting it from somebody else, and then you rent it out on Airbnb for a couple hundred more, and then you're making money on that person's
That's not the idea.
apartment.
Yeah.
So, maybe that's not the idea. And that, of course, can create housing shortages in places that are very densely populated, such as San Francisco, where rental prices are so expensive as it is and then there's a lack of inventory, and that forces people out farther and farther outside.
Well,
of the
maybe
city.
getting to a point where you're successful enough that entrepreneurs start gaming the system. That's a nice problem to have, I suppose.
Sure.
But one element that was brought up at the conference, the EUKN conference, was legal. Maybe we need more legal help for when people do get big enough. That regulation, government attention becomes an issue. This is Greg Shapiro signing off from the European Urban Knowledge Network annual conference. Back to Greg in the studio. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to Broadcast Amsterdam on YouTube. Also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Greg Shapiro on YouTube. And for the United States of Europe, we'll see you next week.